you have John Milton, somebody who writes Paradise Lost, who talks about the fall of man in his epic poem. And John Milton, to his credit, has another poem to his credit called Paradise Again, and he wrote these poems in blank verse. So, and the other tall literary figure is John Donne. Now, John Donne also belongs to 17th century. He belongs to metaphysical school of poetry, and there were other people also in a particular group called the metaphysical school. There were some 4 to 5 people, like people like poet like George Herbert, George Herbert, etc. So these people actually, this group of people, relied upon wit as a main instrument of poetry when we talk about metaphysical poetry. And also in this particular age, we had emergence of cavalier poets. Cavalier poets, like for example, we had Robert Herrick, John Donne, Milton Donne, and the Cavaliers poets like John Herrick was the most important of all. And this age is also known as I earlier told you, that this basically this age is known as the age of conservatism. Conservatism, they were very conservative in nature. When we talk about the literature, they produced, they were very conservative in nature. Conservatism in the sense both religious and political. So all these people, for example, if you talk about John Dryden, if you talk about John Milton, if you talk about John Donne, all these, people, they talked about, Puritanism. They talked about religion. So kind of conservatism in their literature, in the literary works they produced. So literature, particularly when we talk about, this is this is where we are talking about 17th century literature. Okay, so literature produced in this age was satirical in nature. What is a satire? For example, I think Absalom and Achitophel is considered as a satire. So what is satire? Satire is when you say something but you mean another thing. Okay, so a lot of satires have been written in this particular age. Absalom and Achitophel being one of them. So there was, we can say, a lot of reliance. There was a lot of dependence when we talk about the satirical wit in this particular age. All these people, they talked about Puritanism. They talked about, they were conservative in nature. Am I audible to you?
No,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
It is not.
Yes, sir. Audible. It's audible.
Am I audible to you now?
Now okay, sir.
All right. So I'm talking about the age of the literature produced in 17th century. Okay, the age of Dryden, particularly, and we are focusing on the age of Dryden. So all this, age is known for satirical wit. So in this particular age, a lot of satires were written. For example, Absalom and Achitophel being one of them. And this age is, known for that. What I told you about satire. I talked about satire. Satire is a literary work. For example, a poem. When you want to say something, but you, mean another thing. So, and also, you can find, in satire, you find wit which is social, wit, which operates on, which operates commercialism. So there were two things here: the commercialism and materialism. They, accelerated the materialistic outlook. So commercialism was happening. There was a materialistic outlook in this particular age in the writings or literature they produced. So materialism, we can say, it had become dominant, or urbanization was happening at the same time. So they produced the same literature. The age of Dryden produced satires, as I already told you. What did they focus on? They actually talked about all these writers in this particular age. They focused on man and society. They focused on, they talked about the shortcomings, the limitations of man and society rather than the aspirations and dreams. Okay, so since this literature, since this age is, it actually talks about Puritanism, it talks about the religion, religious values, it talks about the religion, all these writers, John Donne, John Dryden. John Dryden being the first James figure. Excuse me. Okay, so Age of Dryden produced satires. It's known for satires, and it focused on man and society, the relationship between man and society, and shortcomings, the limitations. So they actually talked about the literature talks about the 17th century literature talks about the shortcomings of man, the limitations of man, and they also talk about the literature also talks about the relationship between man and society. Okay, so, Age of Dryden, we can say, was focused on faults of man. Alexander, we have some the other. This is also called as the neoclassical age. Neoclassics because can you hear me? Hello, guys. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, sir, we
Is
Yes,
can.
some
sir.
okay? So neoclassical in the sense, yeah. So we can say neoclassical. I was talking about neoclassicism. All these people followed classics. They are like Neo refers to neo. Classics refers to they followed Greek and Roman, literary writers, Greek and Roman writers. That is why neoclassicism. And John Dryden, all these people, Samuel Johnson, Dr. Johnson, they came later on, and the other giant figure who belongs to this particular age was Alexander Pope, who wrote essays on man. Essay on man was basically written in poetry, but he named this particular essay, this writing called essay. But so far this age is concerned, neoclassical literature is concerned, Dryden was the fountainhead, the father, we can say the founder of this particular age, and flowering was done in the age of Alexander Pope, who was the other great poet in this particular age. So basically, this age talks about the idealized view of man, the wretched species, who is neither clear in thought nor in emotions. The man and society, the limitations, all these things are being talked about in this particular age. View of man as degraded, like for example, if you talk about Alexander Pope, he comes with an essay called "Essay on Man," which is written in verse, which is written in poetry, which talks about the man, his nature, and his relationships with society. And he is also known for many proverbs. For example, you might have come across a proverb called "The proper study of man is mankind." So, for example, little learning is a dangerous thing. That is by Alexander Pope. All these proverbs, the famous ones. And Dryden, when we talk about Dryden, Dryden was basically a dramatist. Of course, he was both a poet and a dramatist, but he was more of a dramatist, we can say. And he never deviated from rhymed couplet. Ben Jonson, basically, when we talk about Ben Jonson, another poet who was a contemporary of Shakespeare, a friend of Shakespeare, who wrote that poem called On Shakespeare, he was a part of neoclassical poetry. So they basically, I told you, neoclassicals, they were neoclassical writers. Why? Because they followed classical writers like Aristotle and um, Plato and other Virgil, Homer, all these, they followed Greek and Roman literature, we can say. So they basically imitated classical writers. That's why we are classicals. Okay, so John Ben Jonson was actually the father and founder of neoclassical poetry. And they wrote long epics, for example. We have this epic in your syllabus called Absalom and Achitophel, which is long epic. And at the same time, they wrote short epics also. and satirical epics also. This age, basically, age of Dryden is known for, epics. Okay, long epics, and they were heroic in nature. Ben Jonson, for example, you have all these people belonging to neoclassical age, like Ben Jonson, who was a founder, a father, and a fountainhead of this particular age. Then comes Pope. Then come next is Dr. Samuel Johnson, and in between comes Pope actually. So all these people, all these poets belong to neoclassical poet, neoclassical period or neoclassical age. Dryden, I was talking to you about Dryden. Dryden was basically a dramatist, and he was a poet also. But as a poet and as a dramatist, he and a poet, a dramatist, and also he was a theorist. That kind of multi-dimensional personality. Because he wrote an essay on dramatic poesy. When you talk about literary criticism, there's a famous essay on which was published in 1668 by Dryden. So Dryden was basically a dramatist, poet also, and a theorist also. So you can say he was a multi-dimensional personality. And this essay called an essay of dramatic poesy, it was published in 1668. Okay. And he wrote these essays in rhyme, poetry in rhyme couplets. So, drama which was produced in this age, what was the nature of the writing, what was the nature of the drama or the play? The drama written or produced in this particular age was elitist in nature. It talked about, so for the subject matter, so for the style, the diction, the form, everything was elitist in nature, and the characters, of course. So, overall, we can say in general, the literature produced in this particular age was elitist in nature. Uh, and they actually wanted to they imitated, of course, they imitated Greek and Roman, and the poetry was addressed to the contemporary politics. They wanted to bring literary stream to serious classical literature, and this age talks about it. There were narrow range of themes when we talk about this age. I already told you that this age, when we talked about the nature of literature produced in this particular age, it was about man. It was about the relationship between man and society. It talked about man as a social being, uh, and how man and society are related to each other. So in both in content and form, there were limitations. So this actually age basically talks about the faults of man, the limitations of man. It actually talked about that. Uh, we have, other than Absalom and Achitophel, Dryden writes a drama called Troilus and Cressida. There are many dramas to illustrate it. For example, Aurangzeb being one of the plays written by John Dryden. And these plays, these dramas are made for elitist audience. As I already told you that the literature which is being produced in this particular age is elitist in nature. So for the subject matter, the form, the style, the characters, and everything is elitist in nature. It talked about the elite class, the upper class of the society. So it was meant for elitist audience. Somebody is asking me, please tell me which paper. We are dealing with survey of British literature, and we are into block second. We are talking about 17th century literature with the focus on John Dryden. Okay. Okay, so that was I was talking to you about Dryden dramas, which like we had he wrote dramas like Troilus and Cressida, and the other drama is Aurangzeb. And these plays, these dramas are made for elitist audience. So satire, basically, I told you that the age is known. This age is known for satire. Satire is when you say one thing, but mean another thing. So his poems, when we talk about his poems, he is one of the famous poems is Maclachnoy, Absalom Achitophel, of course, which is described in your syllabus. No, what does he do in this? He tries to, so all these people actually, they try to repeat history, by bringing classical literature, in their writings. So that is what they do. And also, when this age was going on, there are other events which are responsible for the production of literature. So for this age is concerned, uh, like for example, materialism. It talks about materialism. A lot of urbanization was happening. Regarding history, Karl Marx comes up with a comment. He says that because all these people, all these writers, I told you that they kind of repeat the history because they are neoclassicals. They try to bring classical literature in their writings. In a way, in other words, we can say they try to repeat history. On that, in this context, Karl Marx, says that history cannot be repeated. If it does, it becomes a farce. So that is a comment from Karl Marx. So all in all, we can say that Dryden, John Dryden is concerned, he was one of the greatest poets, one of the great poets. Therefore, he had no difficulty in imitating or following classical writers or classics like Greek and Roman writers. Indian Queen, I want to tell you that Indian Queen, we all for love, Aurangzeb and Troilus and Cressida, of course, I talked about it. These were some of the plays by, Dryden, John Dryden, but they were limited in their, we can say, content, form, style, and they were severely, damaged by being elitist. So they were very elitist. We do not talk about. We all, only talk about Absalom and Achitophel. Otherwise, his that is one of the poems he has written. We do not talk about the dramas he has played. He has written, he has produced because they were very, kind of elitist in nature by both subject matter, style, and form. So that was the age of Dryden we talked about in brief. And next age is, the next literary which belongs to the same age, neoclassical, who comes in between, later, who comes in between Dryden, Johnson, and the other Johnson, Samuel Johnson, or Dr. Samuel Johnson. He is Alexander Pope, who is known for his poetry. He actually belongs to the first century of the 18th century. He belongs to the first half of the 18th century, the neoclassical poetry. Okay, so all these people, John Dryden, John Milton, John Donne, later on Ben Jonson. Of course, he also belongs to the same school of thought called neoclassical. So they neoclassical, poetry, as I already told you, that they start with Dryden and it ends with Samuel Johnson. In between comes Pope, Alexander Pope. So all these people, for example, John Milton, Johnson, Dr. Samuel Johnson, and some Cavalier poets like George Herbert, Ratio, etc. So all, there was a common thing between them. What was the common thing between them? That is conservatism. They were conservative in terms of the literature they produced, conservative in the sense politically they were conservative, and also in terms of religion, also they were conservative. Uh, all these people, so they share that common thing. And also, when we talk about this particular age, there were a couple of events which were responsible for the kind of literature which was being produced, or which writers at this particular age wrote. So we had social scientists who had emerged in this particular age and who produced, books like, for example, who talked about the relationship between man and society. As this age talked about man as a social being, he talked about man versus society, or he talked about the faults of man or the limitations of man, and it talked about humans or man as a social being or social animal. Therefore, Pope in his particular essay, in one of his essays called Man versus Society, he says that proper study of mankind is man. So he says that if you have to study a man, mankind, you have to study a man. So he, as I already told you, that he is known for many proverbs like little learning that interesting about man and society. He said that man and society cannot be studied in isolation. They share that common bond, that common connection. And this age is also known as is known for social activity. So basically, this age is tries to look into oneself. It talks about individuality. It asks us to look within. So history, social sciences, they try to sum up the human growth, human society. So focus of this particular age, as I already told you, is the focus of this particular age is on limitations, on the faults of man. Like, for example, this particular person, particular writer called John Wright, and he talks about the same thing in his epic poem, Absolute Epic. So, the focus is on man. The age does not talk about the exploration. It does not talk about the possibilities. It talks about a mode of writing. So, for the mode of writing, the temper of the age, the mood of this particular age is satirical. And basically this age is known for satire, and even its versification. I mean, poetry also. Poetry is also satirical in nature. So that is what, and language. So for the poetry of what is concerned, language is saying that language and society, or the focus of his poetry, and other fellow writers also. For example, we have a poem by Alexander Pope called "The Rape of Law," where small things bloom out of proportion, where cutting of the lock is it becomes heroic. This poem is known as the mock epic or mock poem or mock heroic poem. So, for example, in the context of India, you have, for example, Ramayana, Mahabharata, which are great epics. In the similar way, the poetry, the poem produced by Alexander Pope is mock heroic in nature. And the poetry he wrote is, as I already told you, that is mock heroic poem. He used elevated language. What does he has used elevated language or exaggerated or inflated? It is, you can say, elevated language, the flowery language. Which is something which is blown out of proportion. And the other, that was one poem by the Rape of the Lock, which is the most famous poem, in fact, by Alexander Pope. The other poem by Alexander Pope is Dancier. Dancier is another poem by Alexander Pope, and he talked about the inherent dichotomy between subject and style. Kind of heroic and unheroic. Okay. The other poem by Alexander Pope is Making a Mountain of Molehill. And Pope, other than poetry, he produced essays also. He wrote an essay called Essay on Man, which is, of course, written in poetry, but we call it essay. He talks about talks about man as a social being. He talks about the nature and stuff. So in a way, he tries to create a dichotomy between a wish and the performance. The essay on man defines the overall poetry of neoclassical period. Because he talks about the nature, his position in the society. Uh, the Essay on Man by Alexander Pope, and using the epic style for ridiculing the small, limited nature. So, what does this the poetry written in neoclassical poetry, for example, Rape of the Lock? What does these writers do? They try to ridicule, they try to make fun of, or they try to laugh at smaller things, but in an exaggerated way, in an exaggerated manner. So in a way, we can say that they blow things out of proportion. They use elevated language, the exaggerated language. They try to make it big by using that language, that flowery language of elevated. One second. Okay, so essay on a man, that is the essay on man, which was written by Alexander Pope, which is of course an essay, but that was written in verse, we can say. That was written in poetry, and we can say that reflects the overall mood or overall temper, uh, we can say a kind of a representative poem by Alexander Pope. He uses epic style for ridiculing the small things, small limited nature. So, essay on criticism is also yet another essay by Alexander Pope. It is basically a treatise, a kind of thesis which is about nature of art. So, early 18th century, when we talk about between Dryden and Pope, and other social science books had come, that had a major influence on these poets like Dryden, Pope, Dryden, and all these neoclassical poets like Ben Jonson, John Dryden, Pope, and later on Dr. Samuel, Johnson Townshend. He is the last neoclassical poet. And the other important thing regarding this age is that there was this book, an important book, written by a historian, a famous historian called Edward Gibbon. He came up with a book called The Rise and Fall of Roman Empire. So it was it was a history book. It was historical in nature, we can say. So Byron compared it with the writers of French Revolution, because French Revolution, uh, uh, Byron, who comes later in the scene, Lord Byron, who was a romantic poet, he compares this book with the French, Revolution. The French Revolution stands for equality, dignity, fraternity, freedom of the individual. And that was, French Revolution, which talked about all these things. And Thomas Hobbes, other philosopher who says, who comes into scene, who says that, who said that sense is being brought to the center. So basically, when we talk about age of later on, age of Johnson, the age of Johnson is sometimes called as age of it is called as age of sense or age of sensibility. That's why age, or age of common sense. And John Locke, who was a Greek philosopher, who he comes into scene. He writes an essay called An Essay Concerning Human Understanding. As other writers and other poets were talking about the same thing, they were talking about man and society. They were talking about the relationship between man and society, or man as a social being, his limitations, his faults, etc. So, in the similar manner, John Locke, who is a Greek philosopher, he comes up with an essay called an essay concerning human understanding, which was published in the year 1690. Uh, and we have yet another philosopher called David Hume, who wrote an essay called Nature of Man. So if you look at the titles of these different essays, you will come to know that this age basically talks about the man in general, his nature, you know, his position in the society. It talks about man and society in general. It talks about the faults, the limitations, etc. So all these philosophers, all these writers come up with their own writings in their own ways. As and also, you know, when we talk about it becomes important when you study a writer, you have to study a particular writer in that particular context. So there is always a context to a text. So that background we have to keep in mind, historical background, the political background. It becomes very important, you know, when we study a particular writer. So basically, all in all, we can say that neoclassical drama, you know, neoclassical, in conclusion, we can say that neoclassical drama, neoclassical plays, they were, you know, they are sometimes called as artificial plays. Artificial because they did not, they talked about the elite class of the society, they talked about the, you know, the upper class of the society, and they focused on the limitations, the faults of man. So that is, and they have an influence, we can say, on Puritanism. I told you that the age is age known as by the Puritan nature also, because all these people, they were politically, they were conservative politically, and you know, in terms of religion also. So that is why, you know, after half a century, theaters at this particular age were closed, because they said that all these people said that no, theaters are not important. Theaters should be closed. So according, they were moralists, we can say. They have an influence on Puritanism. So all these people, all these theater, all these writers, all these poets talk, said that theaters should be so. For half a century, maybe theaters were not working. So it was later on in 1660, you know, when theaters were, you know, revival and they were opened. That happened later on. So kind of we can say, so for this, the poetry of this age is concerned, the literature of this age is concerned, it was, there was a narrow outlook when we talk about this, the poetry of this particular age, especially the poetry of Dryden, Pope, etc. Okay, so artificial nature, as I already told you, that is sometimes the plays which are produced in this particular age are artificial in nature, because they did not include the other classes. Maybe they talked about only elite class, the upper class of the society. Uh, the other figure who comes into scene in 17th century, since we're talking about and giving you the background of 17th century. So other dramatist, other playwright who comes into scene is William Congreve. William Congreve is known for, he's a dramatist, of course, he's a famous dramatist, a playwright, and one of his plays or one of his dramas is also prescribed in your syllabus, that is The Way of the World. So the Way of the World, the title, you know, he talks about, in this play, he talks about how the world goes, uh, you know, and this is, I think this is, yeah, this is the time when you were saying. The other drama he has, the other play to his credit is The Old Bachelor. The Old Bachelor was published in 1693. So the primary subject of the age, the focus was social life. It was material life because materialism was happening. The urbanization, materialistic outlook, you can say. Uh, and there is the writer Jeremy Collier, who comes up with a book called A Short View of Morality and Performance of English. It was, you know, kind of highly respected play. And this when we talk about this plays, The Way of the World, or A, you know, The Old Bachelor, these plays or these dramas are called the restoration. Restoration or restoration plays or restoration comedy. Uh, For example, we have many characters, like for example, there is a character called Sir Pooping Platter, Sir John Dood, the Salon Lady Beautiful. These are the different characters in the drama. Another literary figure who comes into scene is Charles Lamb. Charles Lamb, and then when we talk about essays in the field of essay writing, Goldsmith, uh, who, uh, who wrote She Stoops to Conquer. It is a kind of satire on club going women. Uh, for example, Sheridan, the other dramatist who wrote A School for Scandal, yet another comedy by produced in this particular age. Sheridan, it's not in your syllabus, I think. No. So, limitations of man and mankind. So, life was confined to routine activities of materialistic life in this particular age. Next is the age of Johnson. Uh, age of Johnson, his dates of Johnson comes later. He was the last neoclassical poet, we can say. His age of he was born in 1709 and he died in 1784. You know, he when we talk about this man, this poet called Johnson, he was known as lawgiver. Why? I will talk about it in some time. So it was basically the later, you know, 18th part, later part of the 18th century. Johnson. So neoclassical age started with Dryden, as we already talked about, and ends with Dr. Johnson. Now, there are two Johnsons here. Don't get confused. One is Ben Johnson, who was basically a poet, and Samuel Johnson, who wrote critical essays. He is known for writing lives of the English poets, where he talked about various writers or various poets, starting from Chaucer to Shakespeare. And neoclassical age, it actually starts with John Dryden, who was basically he was both a poet and a dramatist, and it ends with Dr. Johnson, Dr. Samuel Johnson. Okay, uh, which and of course I told you that it was the imitation of Greek and Roman literature, especially Aristotle's Poetics and Poets, Virgil. All these they imitated all these Romans and Greek writers. So manner of so for the poetry of Dr. Johnson, Dr. Samuel Johnson is concerned, it was law giving. That is why he is called a lawgiver. Okay. Dryden, for example, I told you about Dryden. Dryden comes with a piece called Macbeth, Rape of the Law, which is an epic dance here. And Dr. Johnson is known for he writes the vanity of human wishes, where he says that wishes, and he talks about wishes are nothingness. They end in nothingness. Okay, so Johnson's age is known uh, uh, known as the age of reason, because rather than writing down the imitating classics, he did not imitate the classics. He pulled down the rivals. He said that reason should be prioritized. That was his, kind of priority. We can say whatever stands out, whatever does not stand out is disliked, condemned, discarded. We say that whatever stands out, the reason, it should be discarded. It should not be accepted. It should be condemned. It should be disliked. So that is why his age is called as age of reason or age of sense and terms also. Vanity of Human Wishes is an piece by him. It was published in 1749. Thomas Wolsey, at that time, he was the Prime Minister of England. He was Prime Minister of Britain. He was both the head of religion, head of army, and head of administrator. So far, Dr. Samuel Johnson is concerned, he was not only a great poet, but he was thinker too. He was more of a good thinker. So it is his, as I already told you, that it is his lives of the poets which became important. Okay. So his work called Lives of Poets is still in demand. So to conclude, we can say that maybe the end of neoclassical poetry, but it had its own virtues, it had its own laurel. Age of Johnson and the age of Rose. Okay, I want to end it here. If you have any questions, anything, if you want to make a comment, do that. Okay. Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, it's audible.
Good afternoon. Not good afternoon. It's good morning, sir. Yes. You want to ask a question or you want to make a comment, any observations, anything, any clarifications, anything? You're welcome. Please do it. We have still 10 minutes. We can utilize them. Question and answer session or any clarification, or if you want to make an observation, you can always do that. Please make it fast. Anybody? You have nothing to say?
Good morning, sir. I am Sharma.
Yes, please.
Sir, it's a small question. Regarding this is relating to the examination pattern, sir. How we have to write a question in terms of scoring good marks? If a question is raised to you, like
Yes.
an essay and renaissance drama, or a short note and guidance, absolute actual.
Yes. I have already
Or,
talked about it in the class, in the offline class.
Not particular,
But
not,
but I got you. For example, if you are supposed to answer a particular question, suppose it is on dryden. So I think you should always start, give some biographical sketch of the writer, the poet, whatever the matter is. Okay. Then you should also, after giving the biographical sketch, then you should come down and you should talk about his literary contribution, because that is something a writer is known for. That becomes very important. Okay. Then come down to the question. And we can do that in the next paragraph. First paragraph should be the biographical sketch, the bio sketch, and his literary contribution or her literary contribution. Then you should talk about the question itself. Then you should directly come to the question and address it accordingly. And as I already told you that you should produce a good content also, but quality is important. I think I have hope I have
Yes.
answered your question.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sir, will you tell me the page number, please?
We were talking about diagram to the 17th century. It is page number 77. It starts from page number 77. 75. When we talk about, yeah, somebody is asking about Cavalier poets. So Cavalier poets, all these people, for example, you have John Herbert, all these George Casio, all these people, they belong to the 17th century itself, but they were a kind of small group. They are known as Cavalier poets. They, like for example, Romantic writers. That was a group. Right? You have Coleridge, Wordsworth. You have early romantics like uh, uh, John Keats, the Shelley, the younger romantics, phase one and phase two. So sometimes there is a group of writers who are named after a particular, who are given a common name. They represent the age and they are taken as a group. For example, romantic writers, neoclassical writers, the same group. Neoclassical writers, when we talk about the father and fountainhead was John Ben Jonson. And then comes Pope. Then comes Dr. Samuel Johnson. So now in today's class, I have talked about all these people belonging to 17th century. The Cavalier group is a separate group actually. George Herford, George Crasso, etc. So that's a small group by. Yeah, all these people are called as Cavalier. Okay. Assignments. You have to download your assignments. I mean, you have to scan your assignments and then upload it on the website. That's what you have to do. Any other questions? Anything?
Good morning, sir. Sir, this is Mildred here. Sir, tell us about the assignment. When are we going to, I mean, we know that it's not yet put up, but however, would we have to put all the answers via the PDFs or will we have to hand it over personally?
No, I think you have to, upload it on the website after you
Okay.
scan it.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to do it by yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, they are first time doing it.
Are
Otherwise,
they doing,
earlier, the students were supposed to hand over it to the study center.
right.
So for the first time, you have been students have been asked to upload it, scan it, upload it on the website.
So this is for all the groups, like whether it is MA English, Hindi, Telugu.
This is for all courses actually.
Okay.
I think both I'm concerned with PG, so it's all for all PG. All
Okay.
PG department.
Thankful
All-
to you, sir. Thank you.
Yes. Any more questions? We have still 5 minutes. Now, anybody, you can come up with your observations, any comments, what you have studied today, or what did you understand? You can always do that. I shall be happy.
Sir, what does it mean, the word sprejatura? Could you please explain?
Where is that?
Spelling that is SPREZZATURA. Sprejatura lifestyle.
No, could you tell me the page number of the textbook?
80, sir. The Cavalier poetry. So they are giving the characteristic features of the poets. 80 page, 6.7.
Okay. It has been defined out there. It is an assumed aid of doing difficult things with effortless mastery. So when you go for some difficult thing, you effort test to do that. Effort test is doing a difficult thing. With effort test, mastery. Yeah. In other words, it actually talks about spontaneity, expressiveness.
Thank you.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
So can I know when is the last date for the submission of assignments and all?
Yeah, for that you have to keep on checking.
The last date for assignments is 23rd April.
Okay. Yes, sir. Okay, okay. Thank you.
I have to interview with you. Last date is not given because the assignments are not released so far. Once the assignments are released, then only the last date for submission will be given.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Any more questions or anything? Yes. Any more questions? Shall we wind it up? We have still a couple of minutes. If you have any questions or any doubts, ask. Or if you want to make a comment, make a clarification, and inquiries, please do that. Somebody's asked me, can you please say lesson plans preparation for exam? Out of 5 units, can you make sure to get 3? I don't know, I cannot talk much about that. I have already given you some units to prepare. I mean, you can consult your friends, please. Yes. Hello? Any more questions, guys? Okay, welcome.
Shall we leave now, sir?
Okay, fine. I'm winding up the class now. The time is over. See you in the next session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Have a nice day.
Same time.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Somebody is asking something.
Thank you, sir. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It's a very informative session in this time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining. Thank you so much. See you in the next session. Take care.